Hello and welcome to Create and Inkspire. This is Amanda from Rise and Procrastinate, and today we are going to talk about how to make a sympathy card that will wow your recipient in their time of sorrow. Sympathy cards are definitely not my favorite thing to create. I don't think that they are anybody's favorite thing to create, but they are necessary sometimes. So let's get started. I am going to start with stamping my stamp in Distress ink in Picket Fence. It is the only one in the Distress ink line that is a pigment ink. And I did this because I found that I got a better result with stamping my oxides over it than I did without doing it. Now, theoretically, you shouldn't have to do this, but for whatever reason, I wasn't getting a great result when I just stamped the oxides onto the paper. So I did it this way. Now, I did heat set in between stamping the ink and the oxide. I found that if I didn't, then it would pull up the Picket Fence when I stamped the next color on top. So I will be doing that throughout this video, but I'm not going to show it the whole time. I also did have to stamp a lot of these colors more than once, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times, to get a solid and vivid stamping, but again, not going to show that. Otherwise, we'd be here forever. So I am popping the colors up on the screen for you so that you can see what colors that I am using. So again, now that I'm stamping another layer, I am going to start with the Picket Fence again, and then I'm going to heat set it, which I'm not going to show on screen, and then I will move on to my next color, which I believe is Antique Linen. Oh, it looks like I missed one on here, so I'm going to stamp this one again for you. Sorry about that. And then we're going to move on to the next color. Yep, Antique Linen. And so I'm just going to continue throughout this until I finish my candle. I think that the next layer here will show you that I did not heat set. Oh, no, we're going to do the rim. It's the part where the wick goes into the candle. Not the wick, but the actual like hole. It's just like the shadow of the wick or something. Not really sure what part to call that. It will show that that the oxides do come up onto these photopolymer stamps. That'll show what I was talking about that here in a minute. If you don't heat set properly in between this part right here. So when I lay this one down, you can see that the Antique Linen did come up. I had to do quite a few stampings of the Antique Linen to get a nice solid layer. So here I am showing you that I did have to heat set this so that I did not keep pulling up that ink. Then I'm going to go in with the frayed burlap and stamp that down now that I have that properly heat set. And then we're going to move on to the wick, and I stamped the wick in VersaFine Clair because I don't feel that the Distress Oxide is, and the black soot is actually black. To me, it's more like a gray, so I did want a nice solid black for my wick. So I am using the VersaFine Clair in Nocturne for that. Then once I got done with that, we're going to move on to the flame, and there are 3 layers for the flame. So we're going to stamp the flame in Squeezed Lemonade, I believe Mustard Seed, and Spiced Marmalade. And again, I did have to stamp all of these multiple times, but I did cut that out for time purposes and, well, because it's repetitive and we don't want to keep doing things repetitive. It's kind of boring. So this card was made for one of my family members who lost her father, so I did kind of want to go all out. Nobody wants to lose anybody, but I think it's especially hard when it is when it is one of your parents or a child or something like that. So I did want to go all out on the sympathy card and make something that was kind of special. All right, so we have finished up the candle stamping, and I think that Altenew does a wonderful job on their layering stamps. This looks very realistic and beautiful. So now we are going to move on, and I'm going to pull out a masking stencil that I made on my Cricut, and this is a oval, obviously. And I'm just lining it up, figuring out where I want to put it, if it's going to fit my image, And then I'm going to stick some Zig two-way glue pen on the back of it and let it dry. Now, in hindsight, I wish I would have thought of using pixie spray instead of the Zig two-way glue pen. But I'll show you, you'll see that later in the video on why I wish I would have used the pixie spray. It wasn't a huge deal, but it did kind of get a little messy. So I'm using the outside piece, the positive, I don't know, I always get that mixed up, to find out exactly where I wanted to stick my little oval piece there. And then I stuck the oval on the inside. So now I'm pulling out some Distress ink in black soot, and in hindsight, I wish I kind of would have maybe went lighter with my colors here, but it turned out great in the end anyway. So I'm going to put the black soot all around the edges, and I did go quite heavy-handed with this, which is maybe why I was not as happy with this as I had pictured in my head, at least. Or wish that I would have went with a lighter color, but it looked good in the end. So I'm going all around the edges with the black soot, and then I'm going to pull in chipped sapphire in the ink, again, not the oxide, and blend that out towards the middle, towards the oval, which is not in the middle, it's offset, but you get the point. And I was going to cover the whole thing, but I decided that the black soot was just too dark. It was starting to look a little depressing, which, I mean, you know, the reason why I'm sending this is depressing, but I didn't want the card to look extremely depressing. It's meant to cheer somebody up or to say that you're sorry. It's not meant to look like the funeral itself. So I brought in the chipped sapphire, hoping that it would brighten up the card a little bit, but I think what it did was just kind of blend the two. Well, I mean, it is ink blending, but I mean, I think I put too much black soot on there anyway, and so there really wasn't a difference between the black soot and the chipped sapphire in the end. So yeah, I went a little too heavy with the chipped sapphire is the point here. So I'm just cleaning up my mess, and then I thought, well, there's really not a contrast between the two colors. Maybe I can darken up the edges again, and that was a futile effort. You'll see in the end that there is no difference between the two colors at all here. That it was just it was basically all one color. By the time it dries, there's no difference at all. The edges weren't darker. It kind of looks like there's maybe a little bit of blue here towards the center, but by the time it dries, there's no difference at all, except for where I had masked it off. So here's I'm pulling this off. You will see that the Zig two-way glue pen left some sticky on my card, which, like I said, wasn't a big deal. I just removed it with the eraser. Thankfully, it didn't mess up my image, but I wish I would have used the pixie spray instead. It wouldn't have left all that sticky icky on my on my card that I had to end up removing. So once I get that all removed, then I'm going to I dried my card completely, and then I sprayed it with water, and I will show that. I covered up that. At this point, I had removed all the stickiness from that oval, so I didn't get my card sticky again. And then I sprayed this with water, and I wish I wouldn't have done that, but I was kind of hoping to remove some of that ink and show more of the blue through that matched that underneath that oval. That was not the case. I mean, it showed a little bit, but I wanted the bright blue to show through, and that didn't happen. So I kind of wish I wouldn't have done that. So now we are moving on to this Neat and Tangled time warp stamp. And it's meant to be, like I said, a time warp. It's kind of like this, to me, it kind of reminds me of like a galaxy, like time warp, black hole kind of thing. But I thought it would be really neat to center it over this flame and make it look like it's shining bright. And I wanted to use this stencil to keep the shine only in the masked area, only in the bright blue area. So I've lined up this stencil. I put some anti-static powder tool on it, and I'm going to ink up that stamp in the VersaMark, and I'm going to cover it with some Ranger holographic embossing powder, which is which is one of my favorite embossing powders. I don't use it enough, but it is one of my favorite embossing powders. And I do use it every chance I think that it will look great. So I am pushing extremely hard here, not only because my desk has a bow in it, so sometimes bigger stamps are harder for me to stamp, but it's also because I am stamping through that stencil, so I need to make sure that I compensate for the thickness of the stencil. And I'm just pouring on the holographic embossing powder, and look at that. Once it is heated, it is beautiful. Now I'm taking this with Sympathy sentiment from the Altenew Candlelight stamp set, and I'm going to stamp that in VersaMark, and I'm going to heat emboss that in Ranger White embossing powder. And I thought that that was a nice kind of scripty but bold sentiment to stand out on my very dark background. So I'm just going to pour the embossing powder on top of that, and then I'm going to heat set that off screen. And then we're going to move on to the inside, and this sentiment is from the Gina K Assorted Greetings stamp set, and I'm just going to stamp that in VersaFine Clair Nocturne. And I decided to leave the inside rather plain compared to what I normally do for my cards on the inside, because it is a Sympathy card, and I already kind of jazzed up the outside pretty good, so I just wanted to keep it fairly simple. We're just going to attach the card front to the card base. And that finishes up the card for today. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you maybe learned some things on how to kind of jazz up your Sympathy cards and make that person feel special in their time of sorrow. I just want to remind you that the supply list is below the video, as well as the links to my personal YouTube channel and social media accounts if you wish to follow me. I also want to thank you for subscribing to Create and Inkspire. And as always, have a great day.